Covenant.
Yes. This is
Could
behind
we get
everything.
into that?
Yes.
Today, we got time to do it right now.
Yeah, behind everything. Let me give you a little background on this, but it's that God is so real that you read Genesis. I mean, just the opening of Genesis, and you see everything that's happened. It begins in Genesis. Genesis, not only Adam, but Abraham, the Jews, the Arabs. Everything begins in Genesis. But in Genesis, God says to Abram, He says, "I will get out of your father's house. I will make of you a great nation. Oh God, make you a great nation, and the whole world will be blessed in you. But whoever blesses you, I'm blessing. Whoever curses you, I'm cursing." You can mark that. Well, that's the Abrahamic Covenant. So it means that whatever person or power or empire or individual, whoever blesses Israel or the Jewish people will be blessed in some way. Whoever curses will be cursed. But it means more than that. It's also the law of reciprocity, meaning how you bless Israel, whatever you do to Israel will come back at you, will be done to you. So that's true of people. Like I say, I've never met a person in my life who loved Israel, loved the Jewish people, and wasn't a blessed person. Never. And I've never met a person who hates the Jewish people who wasn't cursed. Never. Never. And that's true for people. It's true for nations, even for America. And so just to give you an idea, I'll give you a quick overview of the ancient world, and then I'll bring it things we've never talked about. Starting about 3,500 years ago, the biggest center of the world wasn't New York City. It was Egypt, the pharaohs, Egyptian empire. Ruled all over. You could not touch Egypt. But something happened in Egypt. Around that time, about 1200 BC, 13, they turn against the Jewish people. And you know it because it's the Exodus. They oppress them, enslave them, exploit them. At that very moment, I mean, look at history, the very moment, Ramesses, his son, right at that moment, all of a sudden, Egypt collapses. I will curse those who curse you. The Egyptian empire becomes nothing. It never rises again after it existed for thousands of years, comes against the Jewish people, curse them, and all of a sudden it's nothing. And what happens to Egypt? It becomes a second-rate power that is enslaved. As they enslaved Israel, they are enslaved by nations. As they exploited Israel, they are exploited by nations. So that's Egypt. Next big thing, Assyria. Assyria, the Nazis of the ancient world. I mean, if we lived back there, this was the power, Assyria. And what did they do to Israel? Well, that's the harbinger. They are the power. They are the inventors of terrorism, and they are the power that destroyed the northern kingdom. You never see the northern kingdom again. They wiped them off. That's where you get the 10 lost tribes. I mean, utterly destroyed them. There is no future for the northern kingdom. When you see about Jewish people today, it's the southern kingdom. They wiped them out. So what does the Abrahamic Covenant say? Well, what you did to Israel will be done to you. All of a sudden, Babylon rises, other nations rise, and they attack Assyria and wipe them off the earth. So much so, as they did to Israel, so much so, there's not a trace left. Nobody knew where Assyria was. Nobody knew where the ruins were until the 1800s. That's how much it was wiped. Alexander the Great marched right by. He didn't even know Nineveh was there. As they did to Israel, God did to them. Next one, Babylon. And I'm just using a real quick thing. Babylon. What did they do to Israel? Interesting. They not only attacked Israel, they exiled the people. They depopulated Jerusalem. They took everybody away. Babylonian captivity took everybody to another city, Jerusalem was a ghost city. That's what you read about. What happens to Babylon? Gets taken over by Persia, and as time goes on, Babylon becomes a ghost city. The people are depopulated and taken to another city. As they did to Israel, it was done to them. Next great power, and this is all in Daniel, you read the beast. Next is the Persians. Persian Empire. What does Persia do to Israel? They do something that is unique. They're the only power up to that point that actually sort of blessed Israel. They allowed Israel to return to the land. Darius, Cyrus, allowed them to return, rebuild but on a smaller scale as a province of Persia. So they allow them to continue, but as a smaller, never in the form of glory. What does God do to Persia? He allows Persia collapses. He allows Persia to rebuild its empire. It becomes the Parthian Empire, but it's smaller than it was. Then it falls, and then comes a Sassanid Empire. Persia keeps building its empire. He allows it to continue into the 21st century, and we know it today as Iran.
Wow.
That's why Iran exists.
Oh.
It's the only reason, it's funny, amazing. Iran hates Israel, but it doesn't realize it exists because of Israel. Because back then, under Cyrus and Darius, they let Israel continue in a smaller way. So God has allowed Persia to continue on a smaller and smaller. So it's always trying to regain its glory, the Shah of Iran, always trying to regain the glory. But God has preserved that one nation because they preserved Israel. And the only reason they exist is because of Israel.
Think about
It's amazing.
it.
Think about that. And they're trying to destroy Israel now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Next one was Greece. Remember Hanukkah? We'll get it. But Antiochus. Greece had war on Israel, but not so much physically, but it was spiritually. Greece tried to end the religion of Israel. They tried to make all the Jewish people turn away from the God of Israel to the God of the Greeks. And they used Greek culture, Greek language to get them away and apostatize. Well, what happens to Greece? Very interesting. Not only does Antiochus, who is a symbol of the Antichrist, the last year of when he, the end of Hanukkah, all of a sudden he drops dead. His empire collapses. Within a number of years, it doesn't even exist anymore. But beyond that, what God does to Greece, what they did to Israel, God causes the Greeks to turn away from the gods of the Greeks and turn to the God of Israel. It was to the Jew first, then to the Greek. Actually, God redeemed it. They used the Greek language to get the Jews to apostatize. God used the Greek language to spread the gospel. That's why the New Testament's in Greek. I mean, even the gospel, God does it good, is in that. Rome comes up. What does Rome do to Israel? Destroys it, shatters it, spreads it across the world, spreads the Jewish people. That's why you have Jewish people in Hollywood, Jewish people in New York, Jewish people in Branson, because of Rome. Rome spread them across the world. They continued, but they were all across the world. What does God do to Rome? What happens is Rome is scattered. Rome and the nation, Rome in some ways never ended because Roman government all around the world. Senate, we have a Senate all around the world. President, that's from Rome. Capitoline Hill from Rome. Look all over the world, the capitals, it's all Roman. Our language is Latin, was shattered, became French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, even English, part of that. So Rome actually was scattered over the entire world in so many ways. We won't go into that, but he did it. Now, if we're moving from the ancient world to where we are, to up to, I want to get up to Spain, okay? But let's just say ancient world. After the ancient world comes a great power called Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire, Byzantium. What happens? It's strong, but all of a sudden comes a man named Justinian, Emperor Justinian. What he does is he passes laws against the Jewish people, all sorts of laws called the Code of Justinian. He wages war. They can't read the Bible in Hebrew. They can't do this. He takes their possessions away. All of a sudden, right after he does it, comes something called the Plague of Justinian. Strikes Byzantium. It's the bubonic plague. It's the first instance of the Black Death. Right after that happens. And it returns every generation in Byzantium for centuries. And then all of a sudden, within about a century and a half, Byzantium is shattered, has almost nothing left. It becomes a shadow of itself. Now, I want to bring something in because this is important where we are. God, at one point, the Jewish people start being persecuted by Europe. What happens is Islam, Muhammad rises up. Now, I want to say something here. Sometimes God allows powers to rise up as a judgment, not that he's for that power, but he allows them to be a judgment on the others. And so even when we see the rise of Islam now against Europe, against America, as America and Europe are turning away from God, this other power rises up. Well, it happened back then. God actually allowed the Islamic Empire to rise up. Europe was and all these other powers were oppressing the Jewish people. The Islamic Empire, not so much. So he allowed them to prosper for a time. So God can even use these enemies of God for his purpose. But in Europe, what happens in the Middle Ages, Europe starts persecuting the Jews. I mean, big time. They expel them. England, France, in the 1200s, 1300s, all sorts of persecution befalls the Jewish people. In that same century, what happens? Comes the Black Plague. Again, the same thing that happened with Justinian, the bubonic plague returns to Europe. Then comes the 100 Years' War. Same thing. This is England and France. They just expelled the Jews. They are it becomes the worst time actually in history. I want to just give one. I'm just going to throw in a little piece here, but one more key one: the Spanish Empire, Spain. Jewish people go to Spain. They are blessed there. Yes. They prosper there. There are hundreds of thousands of them there. And what happens to Spain? It rises, rises, rises to become the Spanish Empire. But just as it's rising, a guy named Torquemada comes in power. He says, we're going to have an inquisition the Inquisition was launched against the Jews. And so what happens is he convinces Isabella and Ferdinand to say all the Jews are out on this date. So he says you either leave or you get killed. It's just, so the Jewish people have to leave Spain. Well, soon after that, Spain should have been in power. They had the whole new world pretty much. They should have been the leading power for centuries. But what happens is Spain starts deteriorating until it becomes a second-rate power. Nothing left of the Spanish Empire. It all collapses as they turned on the Jews. And the thing is that, but there is another, this has to do with you, Jim, because there was another power is that when the Jewish people were fleeing Spain, they go to a city of provinces that were kind of loose provinces, that is Amsterdam. And the Dutch peoples, they go there. Amsterdam says, come in, Jewish people, and we're going to bless you. Amsterdam blesses the Jewish people, allows them to prosper. And what happens to Amsterdam? I will bless those who bless you. Amsterdam, this city, unlikely city, becomes a world empire, the Dutch Empire, all over the world. God just raises up this unlikely bunch of regions. They become the great Dutch Empire, and with Jewish people involved in everything, and they help found America. That's where you get New Amsterdam, New York City. So whoever, it's like clockwork. And it's going to get much more dramatic another time where it gets to the English Empire, America, Russia, China, where we are. We'll see it at another time. But it has determined everything.